Let's begin with a recitation of the four great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Thank you very much for having me. It is a great honor and pleasure to be able to share with you just this absolutely wonderful treatise. Um, just to give you a little bit of some historical context for it. So it is believed like that this treatise first showed up in China around 550 CE. And this is actually a really important period in Chinese Buddhism. To give you just an idea, Bodhidharma was said to have been alive somewhere between 420 and 557 CE, so right around this time. The founding of the Huayan school, which takes as its most important text, the Avatamsaka Sutra. Its first patriarch was Du Xun, and he was alive from 557 to 640. The founding of the Tiantai school, which uses the Lotus Sutra, its first patriarch, Chinese patriarch, Hui Wen, was alive sometime around 550. So this time period in Chinese Buddhism was incredibly exciting. You had these sutras and shastras pouring out of India into China, and the indigenous Chinese people were really picking them up and looking into them. This particular treatise, The Awakening of Mahayana Faith, was one of those tools with which the Chinese practitioners, they were really looking at all of these concepts, all of these tools for Buddhism, and they were just hammering away at it. So this treatise, it really served as the anvil upon which many fine points of doctrine were just hammered again and again. This being said, the authorship of The Awakening of Mahayana Faith is uncertain. It is attributed to Asvaghosha, who is a poet monk who lived between 80 and 150 CE. So many commentators look to this specific historical individual as having been the author of the treatise. However, this is unlikely because the subject matter that was investigated in the treatise wouldn't actually develop for several hundred years after Asvaghosha's death. So other um, possible origins for it. The the earliest mentions of this treatise, it looked at its translation by a character named Paramartha, and he came from India to China, and he's well known for doing many, many translations. Um, but in modern day times, people are now looking at Paramartha as being a possible author of the treatise itself. So not just a translator, but and the author itself. Whereas others believe another translator, Tanlin, who was apprenticed to Bodhiruchi, was the translator, just based on some of the language. But it is very hard to know because one of the features of many Buddhist texts is that the authors are self-effacing. Even at the beginning of this treatise, the author specifically states that he is writing this treatise for the benefit of sentient beings to help them put down their doubts and their wrong views, and that he does not wish any personal favor or recognition for it. Doesn't want to become famous. And so a lot of times the original authorship is difficult just because this is the way many Buddhist practitioners are. They practice and they write not for their own glory, but for the benefit of all sentient beings, the benefit of the Buddhist tradition itself. But this is generally considered to be a Chinese original text. And it is a treatise that has actually had over 300 commentaries written on it between when it showed up at 550 CE and 1900. So let's look a little bit into the title itself. The Chinese for it is Da Shang Qi Xin Lun. So I apologize for any butchering of the Chinese language that I've just committed. But Da Shang stands for Mahayana. So generally, when we hear the word Mahayana, we are thinking about a specific division of Buddhism. You've got your Mahayana, you've got your Shravakayana or your Hinayana, if you're being a little pejorative, and then you've got your Pratyekayana. So you've got these different vehicles of Buddhism. And Dashang or Mahayana fits that bill. However, within the context of this treatise, that is not the only way that it's meant. There are a few limited uses of it in this way, Mahayana as opposed to Shravakayana. But generally speaking, it is pointing towards the absolute or mind itself. So we have Qi Xin, which is to give rise to faith or to give rise to trust. And we're not talking about a superficial belief here, but a deep-seated trust that allows one to move forward with clarity and conviction. With regards to faith, I really lean into some of the tools provided by the Abhidharma. So in the Abhidharma, faith or sada is a mental factor, a universal mental factor that is present in all wholesome states of mind. So any non-self-centered state of mind has faith in it. And it looks at faith in terms of function. So Bhikkhu Bodhi's Abhidharma has this to say about it. Its function is to clarify, as a water-clearing gem causes muddy water to become clear, or its function is to set forth, as one might set forth to cross a flood. It is manifested as non-fogginess, i.e., the removal of the mind's impurities, or as a resolution. So this is a very important little package of information that I feel we can gain a lot of benefit from. So normally, when we think about faith, one of the ways in which we consider faith is that it's faith in. I have faith in something. I have faith in uh, I have faith that the sun is going to rise tomorrow. I have faith in this. I have faith in that. And this is a very mundane kind of faith. Master Sheng Yen, in one of his books, he shared a Chinese saying that I constantly return to. And it goes that without faith, a person could not even stand. And so this mundane kind of faith is something that we really rely on to do anything. Like, for example, when I'm done giving this talk, I will have a faith that if I walk over to that door, put my hand on the knob, close my hand and turn it, that I will be able to open the door. And if I did not have that simple kind of faith, I wouldn't be able to embark on a course of action. So this is the faith that enables a resolution. And this is very important because we're talking about our practice here. We're talking about what we're doing with this life that we have. And faith is the basis of any kind of activity. So when we have mundane types of faiths. It allows mundane types of actions. I can pick up a glass of water and I can drink it. I can turn the key in my car and I can drive to work. This kind of action is available to us. But the type of faith that is being presented in this treatise is not a simple mundane faith. It is Mahayana faith. So it is absolute faith. It is the faith that is the function of mind itself. And this function enables a clarification and it enables a setting forth. It enables activity. So this Mahayana faith is the faith that clarifies mind and allows more and more kinds of action that aren't just bound by our conventional ways of thinking and considering. Um, this is one author, he describes it as an essence function relationship rather than a subject object relationship. So when I have faith in something, this is a subject and object relationship because I, the subject, have faith in that thing, and that thing is an object. But the type of faith that we're investigating here, this is the essence and function. So the essence is mind, and the function is the faith itself. So these are not actually separate things. And this is very important because one of the tenets that it investigates in this treatise is the one mind. And in the one mind, everything is together. There's not a separateness there that exists between things, not in reality, only in illusion. This is something that can be. So if I have faith in something, we're already making use of a subject-object relationship, which flies in the face of Mahayana. A lot of the English translations of this treatise, they treat it in the same way, which I feel is kind of unfortunate. They'll call it the Awakening of Faith in Mahayana, but I prefer the Sung Bae Park's translation, where it's the Awakening of Mahayana Faith. So this is just very important to remember and to consider. So Dashang, Qixin, Lun. Lun being treaties. So we have the Awakening of Mahayana Faith treaties. And this treatise, for being as small as it is jam-packed with just absolute gems. To give you just an example of its size, I have to look around for all my scattered translations. So this is a very tiny book. And in this book, we've got two translations of this text, as well as the Chinese. So we've got the English, the Chinese, and two translations. And it's just very, very short. In the the original Chinese, it takes up less than 20 pages, but it's still deep enough. Remember that over 300 commentaries have been written on it, even before 1900. So it is just incredibly deep. And for my purposes today, I'm going to try to share just some of the simplest things. It's as simple as one, two, three. So one, mind, two, aspects, and three, greatnesses. And this should be enough to perhaps whet your palate, to awaken an interest, awaken a faith that this is a very useful piece of material and that you can dive into it. Because at the end of the day, it is truly about our individual exploration and investigation of the material. This is going to be what truly enables a personal application of this kind of material. So we start with one mind. So I'm going to read a little bit from the text directly. So it says, generally speaking, Mahayana is to be expounded from two points of view. One is the principle, and the other is the significance. So the principle is the mind of the sentient being. This mind includes in itself all states of being of the phenomenal world and the transcendental world. So, with this one mind, there is nothing outside of it. All possible forms of expression, all possible modes are contained within this one mind. There's nothing at all outside of it, whether it is mundane or transcendental, whether it's what we're experiencing in our normal everyday to day lives, going to sleep and waking up, or in the depths of profound realization. All things are contained within this one mind. So, on the basis of this mind, the meanings of the Mahayana may be unfolded. Why? Because the absolute aspect of this mind represents the essence of Mahayana, and the phenomenal aspect of this mind indicates the essence, attributes, and influences of Mahayana itself. So, look at us. We're flying through already. We've got the one mind and the two aspects. So, the two aspects are the absolute and the relative. And this is a core Madhyamaka teaching, the middle way school, just as the teaching on one mind is a core Yogacara teaching. And this is the essential component of our faith. Our faith is that there is just mind, one mind in two aspects. So the absolute is indivisible. So in the absolute aspect, you can't actually point at any one thing. So this is the reason that I took the time earlier to talk about essence and function, because the essence of mind is this indivisible suchness. And what the treatise has to say about suchness is actually is pretty rich. It says that suchness is just a word to put an end to words, because what we are accomplishing with our use of language is dividing this from that. You know, when we've got two different words, we're looking at two aspects or two different things. So any type of conceptualization has along with it some type of boundaries, some kind of borders. And this flies in the face of suchness, because the essence of mind is that there's nothing separate at all, that you can't actually put borders between things. You've probably heard of a term shunyata, or emptiness. This is something that shows up just everywhere. And for those of us who have recited the Heart Sutra even a single time, we've heard this many, many times. This emptiness or shunyata, we're not talking about the emptiness of a glass. So if I were to just sling my water across the room and say, aha, shunyata, that wouldn't be a proper use of that term, because what shunyata is pointing to is not an emptiness or a separateness. You know, we've got a full glass and then an empty glass. But what it's pointing towards is an all inclusivity. There is a translator, Red Pine, who translates some of my favorite works. He does the Lankavatara, he does the Heart Sutra, he's even done the Platform Sutra. But what he had to say about shunyata in his translation of the Heart Sutra was that emptiness is not so much about the distance between you and me as it is about the lack of distance. And so suchness is this way. The essence of mind is that it cannot be divided. One of the examples that they often use in the various sutras and treaties is that of the ocean, and how the ocean is just one. In all of the maps, we put labels on things. This is the Pacific Ocean. This is the Atlantic Ocean. This is the Indian Ocean. But all of these are just mere conceptualizations. They're completely and totally arbitrary. And they have nothing to do with the ocean as it is. They only have to do with the ocean as we conceive of it. And so any type of separateness is only illusion. And this is what the treaty says. So its absolute aspect is indivisible suchness. And this is just the way that mind is. It's one mind, but it's not one mind as compared to another. And my teacher and I myself, um, we both prefer, instead of one mind, to use just mind. Because even with the idea of oneness, it's like we're still trying to put a bubble around everything. So everything goes into the one mind. And there's just the barest implication of a container. But there is a saying in the Chan tradition, it's a hua to. If everything returns to the one, where does the one return to? And our idea of oneness is just a concept. Everything returns to, or everything never left, mind. Just mind. And this is its absolute aspect. But we also have a relative aspect. And this is very important. Sometimes in my practice, I feel as though I have overemphasized a looking towards or for the absolute at the expense of the relative. And this is not a particularly good way to practice. The treatise actually cautions against this. We have to have an understanding and appreciation of the relative, because the relative aspect of mind is still mind. And it's very important to know and be able to work with it. So this is anything having to do with conditionality, processes, or cyclic existence. The treatise itself uses as a translation samsara. This is the relative aspect of mind. Anything that didn't used to be, anything that came into being, persists for a while, and then departs. This is cyclic existence. So anything having to do with a process fits this bill. And in the probably the most foundational teaching with regards to the relative aspect of mind is a fancy Sanskrit word. If you can only remember one thing from tonight's presentation, make it the one mind. But if you can remember two things from this presentation, remember pratitya samutpada. Causes and conditions never fail. So anything that appears within mind appears due to causes and conditions. Emptiness, shunyata, the absolute, is creeping into our understanding and our perception of the relative when we understand this. So pratitya samutpada, causes and conditions never fail. When there are supporting conditions, something appears. When there are no longer supporting conditions, that thing no longer appears. And this is cyclic existence. So, one mind, two aspects, three greatnesses. So, the three greatnesses are the essence, the attributes, and the influences. So the essence is something that is common to both the relative and the absolute. The essence of mind is suchness, indivisible suchness. So this is the essence of mind. Then it talks about the attributes, and we're talking about the attributes of Mahayana. So anytime we have marks or characteristics, we have already taken a step out of the absolute into the relative because we can suddenly point at something. So this is a thing that has these attributes. If we point towards this strange appearance on your screen, this is an appearance that has the attribute of hairy, has the attribute of white. When we're talking about three greatnesses, the attributes that it's specifically referring to are a bit different than the mundane. In the same way that mundane faith is different than Mahayana faith, the attributes of the mundanity are different than the attributes of the Mahayana. Because while any mundane thing, any conditioned appearance has attributes such as impermanence, a lack of self, emptiness, the three marks, the three Dharma seals. The marks or attributes of the Mahayana are not this way. As it is presented in the treatise, it talks about infinite, perfect merits. So all of the good qualities, the beneficial qualities of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas. This is considered to be the greatness of attributes of Mahayana. So the Buddha has infinite wisdom. The Buddha has infinite compassion. These are very different than the limited wisdom and compassion of an ordinary sentient being. But what we're talking about here is the attributes of the Mahayana itself, the attributes of suchness, which in its absolute aspect, we can't put any kind of attributions towards it at all. But when we are looking at it from the relative, we have to have something to work with. And so they give us these infinite perfect merits. One of the descriptors in the treatise is that the practitioner stands at the crossroads or the nexus of the absolute and the relative. So if you can imagine, you've got a crossroads. You've got the relative and you have the absolute. And the bodhisattva, as a practitioner, stands with one foot in each. So one foot firmly rooted in the absolute, the other firmly rooted in the relative. And so this gives us the ability to do our best to talk about the relative. The greatness of the essence, the greatness of the attributes, and the greatness of the influence. So the influence of the Mahayana. This is actually one of my favorite parts about the treaties, because the influence of the Mahayana is something that is felt in the relative sphere. So in the relative sphere, we have ordinary sentient beings. Its essence is undifferentiated suchness, but this is not the way that we and other sentient beings experience it. We experience infinite variation, variety, and separations. And the reason that this happens is because of ignorance. This is pratitya samutpada, causes and conditions never fail. This refers to the 12 nadanas, dependent origination from the original presentation of Shakyamuni Buddha. The reason that there are these various appearances. So you are an appearance, I am an appearance, the bookcase, the statues, um, past, present, and future. So the appearance of anything, any phenomena. So whether it appears to be a discrete entity or whether it appears to be some kind of mark or characteristic. These kinds of appearances are only made possible by ignorance. Ignorance forms the foundation of all appearances. All movement appears to be movement because of ignorance. All change appears to be change because of ignorance. And it is the influence of ignorance that leads to the afflictions that arise in mind. We got your three poisons. You got your greed, hatred, and ignorance. And it is the influence, or one of my translations refers to it as the permeation of ignorance that facilitates this kind of activity. So any afflicted activity is due to the permeation or influence of ignorance. Whereas the greatness of the influence, and we're talking about the greatness of the influence of the Mahayana, this is a very different kind of influence. Whereas the influence of ignorance leads to the arising of afflictions and vexations. It leads to coarse, painful appearances in the world. Any activity that we see, whether it's with our eyes, whether with our ears, any act of violence or uncaring, this has at its roots the influence or the permeation of ignorance. But Mahayana itself is also permeating and influencing mind. Just as we have here today a gathering of interested practitioners. This is rooted in a retreat center or monastery in upstate New York. That retreat center came from the dream or the practice of Master Shen Yan. And that came from the dream and practice of his master, and so on and so forth, all the way back to Shakyamuni Buddha. So there is another kind of influence or permeation in mind. And this is the permeation or influence of suchness itself. So I actually feel reading a little bit about that just from the book. So it may be said that there is the principle of suchness, and it can permeate into ignorance. So ignorance is like permeating into mind, and suchness is permeating into ignorance itself. Through the force of this permeation, suchness causes the deluded mind to loathe the suffering of samsara and aspire for nirvana. Because this mind, though still deluded, is now possessed with loathing and aspiration, it permeates into suchness in that it induces suchness to manifest itself. Thus, a person comes to believe in his essential nature. We've come full circle again, because what we're talking about, belief in the essential nature, is the Mahayana faith. This faith, which is not a subject object. Like, I have faith in my true nature, which is out there somewhere. But it is the faith that there is a true nature, and that true nature is not separate. That true nature is not out there externally. One of the things that Master Lin Chi said, let me just flip through. I have just this pile of books all around me, and they're tagged with so many different tags. So anytime I've like, oh, here's a quote that could fit this part, I gotta sift through my pile. So this is what Master Lin Chi said a couple hundred years ago. He said that if students today do not succeed, where is their shortcoming? Their defect is that they do not believe in themselves. If you are unable to believe in yourself as and this is in brackets, as a vessel of the universal enlightened reality, you go off frantically following various objects and get turned around by them so that you have no independence. So this faith in one's true nature is the faith that it's not something that's out there. It's not something that's outside. One of these days, I'll come up with a way of saying faith in one's true nature that doesn't use the faith in a subject-object presentation. This is actually something that Master Han Shan, he described as being the shortcut. So Master Han Shan said, that's in this pile. This is a print off. So you have to have a firm conviction, a firm faith in your own mind, in your own true mind, that originally it is pure and clear without the slightest lingering thing. It is bright and perfect, and it pervades throughout the Dharma Dhatu. So this is the fundamental faith. It is the Mahayana faith. And this is how all practice begins. Practice begins with this faith. It's not the faith in something out there. It is faith that is the functioning of mind. And remember, we talked about the function of faith earlier as being it brings clarity and it enables activity. As practitioners, this Mahayana faith is what enables the production of actions via body, speech, and mind that are not bound by our habitual tendencies. What we're talking about here in the sometimes cumbersome language of the treaties is the permeation of ignorance. This is our habitual tendencies. Our habitual tendencies are to see ourselves as being separate, discrete entities. I am separate from you, and I have these marks and characteristics. I am this many years old. I weigh this much. I have all of these things. And the identification with these habitual tendencies, this is the permeation of ignorance. But when we encounter the teachings and we investigate them and we begin to apply them, the habitual tendencies start to weaken. And for the very first time, actions can be produced that are no longer bound by the habitual tendencies. Compassion that is very deep, a compassion that doesn't have to do with my family, my tribes, my things, begins to appear. A compassion that is without bounds. A compassion that is rooted in the wisdom of the one mind. And this is the permeation of suchness. As we begin to investigate the practice, as we begin to study and apply, this faith grows. And what the treatise talks about is that in the experience of the practitioner, there is a transformation. There is a transformation of the faithful mind, or the mind of faith, to a demonstration of the Buddha mind. And this transformation is just a purely within the realm of the relative, because it has to do with changing from one to another. But really, it just has to do with the dropping away of certain dross to reveal what was already there. But it is predicated on this faith, the Mahayana faith, and awakening this Mahayana faith, which is to recognize that there is just this one mind. And this one mind, the essence of it is indivisible suchness. There's no dividing past, present, future. There's no dividing you from me. There's just mind. But the experience of this mind, you have the two aspects. We got the absolute and we've got the relative. And as practitioners, we stand at the crossroads. One foot in the absolute. This is the, the source of the faith. This is the Mahayana faith, which enables more and more activities of wisdom and compassion. But those are expressed and demonstrated where the other foot is firmly rooted in the relative. In the absolute, so in some of the teachings, they talk about the Adi Buddhas or the primordial Buddhas. And the primordial Buddhas, they don't move, they don't speak, they are just simply the immutable, unchanging, peaceful joy. And that is all. There are even many stories in the Chan Annals which describe a very gifted student who comes up and sits in front of a teacher who asks him a question, and he does nothing. He just sits with pristine stillness, just absolutely no movement. And out of everyone who's gathered there, only the master can can know that, oh wow, this is truly a great demonstration of practice. I don't know if you've ever tried to answer someone's question. So if someone comes up to you with a deeply sincere question about the practice, and You just, I'm going to sit and I'm not going to move. I'm not going to give them anything. This is the demonstration. Sometimes that might work, but mostly that's not going to serve because this type of demonstration isn't something that we can really play at. We have the faith or the trust that the true nature is immaculate. The true nature is unmoving. The true nature is perfect and pristine. But the bodhisattva, the practitioner, is the bridge twixt these two aspects. And they ferry sentient beings from one shore to the other. But it's not as though you're actually taking a sentient being and you're like, get into the chopper and let's go over there. Because the absolute is immanent. It's mind, it's just mind and indivisible suchness. And so it's not more suchness over there than it is here. So when we are talking about ferrying sentient beings to the other side, what we're really talking about is awakening this Mahayana faith in them such that they can begin to feel it. And our skillful activity is limitless. It has no bounds. It doesn't look like this and not like that. The skillful activity of the bodhisattva, as it describes in the treatise, is spontaneous. And it conforms to whatever situation they happen to be present in. So whatever happens to be going on, spontaneously, they manifest activity via body, speech, and mind that helps awaken this Mahayana faith in them. Sometimes this is simply a smile. Sometimes it's a kind word. Sometimes it's picking someone up and driving them to the hospital to visit a loved one. There are no limits on what kind of activity can be demonstrated, but it is all the permeation of suchness. So when this Mahayana faith is the source of our activity via body, speech, and mind, what we produce via body, speech, and mind is the permeation of suchness. Inasmuch as we cleave to the reality presented by our habitual tendencies, remember, rooted in ignorance, we are the permeation of ignorance. But when our actions are rooted in this Mahayana faith, when our lives are an expression of this Mahayana faith, what we are the activity, we are the influence, the permeation of suchness. So these are the central ideas that are presented in this treatise. You've got the one mind, the two aspects, and the three greatnesses. And most of the rest of the treatise is just like teasing these out and looking at them in greater detail from different directions. But it's just wonderful. I did want to share a little bit with regards to the specific practices that it puts forth, particularly the practices of cessation and clear observation. So with regards to cessation, I'm just going to read directly. To practice cessation, a man should stay in a quiet place and sit erect in an even temper. His attention should be focused neither on breathing, nor on any form or color, nor on empty space, earth, water, fire, wind, nor even on what has been seen, heard, remembered, or conceived. All thoughts, as soon as they are conjured up, are to be discarded, and even the thought of discarding them is to be put away. This is the essential practice of bringing to cessation one's attachment to illusions. This is something that it's easier for us to practice while we're on a retreat. While we're on a retreat, whatever it is that shows up in mind, you just know, hey, that was created by the mind, and you let it go. You just continue to let it go. And once you have enough stability, then you let go of letting go. What it's in some ways is describing as silent illumination, an objectless practice, because all objects are illusions. And this practice of cessation is the practice of ceasing to create illusions. So whenever a thought shows up, you just know this was a thought created by mind. It only pertains to the world of illusion, and you let it go. So even if he arises from his sitting position and engages in other activities, such as going, coming, advancing, or standing still, he should at all times be mindful of the application of expedient means of perfecting cessation, conform to the immobile principle of the essential nature of reality, and observe and examine the resulting experiences. So whether walking, sitting, standing, lying down, you just continue to practice this way. And there is the faith that this brings the mind in conformity to its absolute aspect, to indivisible suchness, because we're not playing around with individual thoughts or individual phenomena. We just let them all go. Now, if this person practices cessation only, then his mind will be sunk in self-complacency and he will be slothful. He will not delight in performing good acts, but will keep himself far away from the exercise of great compassion. It is therefore necessary to practice clear observation as well. This treatise does not endorse the abandoning of the relative aspect of mind. This is actually something that many Chan masters warn about in their various teachings. They warn about or caution against a tendency to become attached to quietude. Ah, I'm quiet. I feel so peaceful and serene. This is what I want. I want to feel this way all the time. It's really just a more subtle form of attachment. And it's one that will lead to alienation from sentient beings, which will prevent awakening to this great realization that you are not separate from me. Because if I'm attached to quietude, well, man, every time I'm around you, you're always talking and you're making me feel all these things. And, I don't feel calm anymore. And I don't like that. So I don't like you. So I'm going to stay away from you. I'm just going to be off by myself. I'm going to chill out and I'm just going to cease all illusions. But it can't be this way because there is this subtle distinction making. I want this and I don't want that. I prefer this and not that. And so this clear observation. is required. So let's see what it has to say about clear observation. So the one who practices clear observation should observe that all conditioned phenomena in the world are unstationary and are subject to instantaneous transformation and destruction. Things don't last. And, even that that car I have out in my garage, I've been driving it for a long time and it's a Honda. So it's going to last a while longer. I bet I can get 250,000 miles out of that thing. But in an instant, it can be subject to destruction. And all phenomena are this way, whether it is a person, whether it is a house, whether it's a thought or a feeling, all phenomena are unstationary and are subject to instantaneous transformation and destruction. So that pleasant state that I worked myself into, I'm feeling so wonderful. Been meditating all day. And then you know, my partner comes into the room and she's asking me to do this and that, and I don't want to do this and that. And that peaceful, pleasant feeling instantaneously transformed into anger, into resentment. All phenomena are this way. That all activities of the mind arise and are extinguished from moment to moment, and that therefore all of these induce suffering. So all of the phenomena in the world, they are subject to change. They are constantly coming and going. And so if they become a source of attachment, they will generate suffering. You should reflect in the following way. All living beings, from the beginningless beginning, because they are permeated by ignorance, have allowed their mind to remain in samsara. They have already suffered all the great miseries of the body and mind. They are at present under incalculable pressure and constraint, and their suffering in the future will likewise be limited. Everybody is being pushed, pulled, squeezed in uncomfortable ways. And likewise, will continue to be. These sufferings are difficult to forsake, difficult to shake off, and yet these beings are unaware that they are in such a state. For this, they're greatly to be pitied. So we consider the plight of sentient beings, whether they are human beings, whether they are animals, whether they're ghosts, hell dwellers, even gods and demigods. All sentient beings are this way. After reflecting in this way, this person should pluck up their courage and make a great vow to this effect. May my mind be free from discriminations, so that I may practice all of the various meritorious acts everywhere in the 10 directions. May I, to the end of the future, by applying limitless expedient means, help all suffering sentient beings, so that they may obtain the bliss of nirvana, the ultimate goal. One of the primary practices advocated by the treaties is the generation of vows. When we see the way that things are, indeed, the way that sentient beings are, this is the natural response. This vow, the giving rise to this vow, and the giving rise to the activity which fulfill the vow. This is the permeation of suchness. This is the intrinsically pure essence of mind that is influencing the environment, that is some of the Chan masters, the ancient masters, they talked about like the reflections of the eye in the withered skull. Because in this relative sphere, mind, with all of the greatness of its attributes, cannot appear, but it can appear or it can influence in small, subtle ways. Because when we give rise to these vows, and then we give rise to the activities that fulfill the vows, the greatness of suchness is reflected into this world. In the same way that, I got my glasses on, you can see the monitor reflecting off of my glasses. When I'm outside during the day, the sun reflects off of my glasses. So someone who is not facing the sun, they're facing me, they can experience the sun a little bit. They can, wow, there is a sun. I can see it because of how you're standing. And so with our practices, the way that we live via body, speech, and mind, we reflect the greatness, the the intrinsic perfect purity of the true nature so that it can be felt. So that in those who see, it begins to awaken this Mahayana faith in them. And then their activities of body, speech, and mind begin to change. They begin to reflect the intrinsic perfect purity of true nature in the world, and so on and so forth. But this permeation of suchness, unlike the permeation of ignorance, has no ending. So with suchness, we say that it started in beginningless time. So you can't point a finger and say that there was a beginning to it, but there is an end. Whereas the permeation of suchness is not this way. It continues forever. And we have as examples the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas who embody this principle, who embody this truth, because they will continue to practice, they will continue to demonstrate, they will continue to bring benefit to sentient beings with no end. And the nature of these Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, just as the nature of the Buddhas, is no different than our nature. It is our nature. So when we begin to awaken this Mahayana faith, we begin to awaken increasing clarity in this truth. And we begin to awaken increasingly broad and skillful actions which demonstrate this truth, such that instead of just merely demonstrating a mind of faith, we demonstrate the Buddha mind. This is the practice that the treatise on awakening Mahayana faith presents. The treatise says this, as do the ancient masters of Chan. This is what they teach. So I hope that I've managed to whet your appetites a little bit to look into this treatise. I said it's very, very short, but it is absolutely jam-packed with powerful and profound Dharma. That if you sincerely investigate, and you don't want to be in a hurry, but when you sincerely investigate, you can feel this and you can demonstrate this. Like, this is, I could read this book, any of my translations, in 1 to 2 hours. It would be a very quick read. But I have been studying them for 5 or 6 months. Some days I don't make it past a paragraph, but it's not about finishing. It's not about, being able to check off a box. Oh yeah, I read that treatise. It's about bringing it in. It's about really feeling it. It's about considering it, remembering it, just moment to moment, day to day, remembering that this faith is a function of mind and that this mind is intrinsically pure without any divisions. Well, I feel like I've talked a lot, but as Master Lin, she said, there is no end to this talk, this trashy talk, some translations I've seen. But I've, I will, I'll call an end to my talk today anyway. So I want to thank you all so much for coming. And if you have any questions, I would be grateful to receive them. Amitofo.